I'd like to call the May 19th Occupancy Tax Board Workshop to order. At this time, Ms. Mervine, would you please take the roll?
Committee member Moore.
Present.
Member Sojourner.
Present.
Member
Present.
Member Bitzer. Chair, you have more.
Thank you. I'm sorry I missed the time on the call to order. It was 2:34. At this time, I will entertain an approval of the agenda.
I make a motion to accept the agenda.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the information items, which Ms. Mervine, will discuss.
We introduced the
Are
new
we
board
approving
member?
The minutes from last time?
We did, okay.
We have
We
no
don't have, we
proof.
can't, this is a workshop, so we don't vote on anything.
Oh, okay.
So do I do the introduction?
Yes, you do.
Okay, I would like to introduce our newest board member, Bonnie Bitzer. Did I say that correctly?
Can you silence him? Bonnie, if you'd like to say anything.
Thank you to whoever voted for me to be on this group. I think I'm going to thank them. We'll find out in a couple years if that's true or not, right? No, I'm pleased to be here, and I hope that I can contribute something of value.
We're happy you're here. Thank you.
Glad for you to join us. Now we're going to discuss the meeting process review and discussion.
Correct. So everybody should have a copy of the meeting process, which is in different colors.
Should be the one that says Public Affairs on the top
Okay.
with the printed name, signature, and date at the bottom.
Go ahead, you can start.
Oh, sorry, didn't realize I was going through all of this stuff. All right, so as it states, the Occupancy Tax Board makes recommendations to the Finance Committee on what we feel is creating the best bang for our bucks on the tourism dollars. So they have a process to do in order to apply for the funds. They have to submit an application to the special events manager. Then the OTB reviews the recommendations, and then we submit it to Finance Committee. The Finance Committee reviews it. They can make any changes, any modifications that they want, and then it goes to the City Council. And again, at the City Council, they can either award it, change it, deny it, and make whatever. Since we deal with the public, we're kind of giving the information on what we know and what we see to our representatives in the city. We're looking at events that will bring out the out-of-town guests. I mean, we need to see out-of-town visitors. So if it's an event, it might be a fantastic event that does wonderful things for Roswell, but that would be a local event if it's not bringing in the tourists.
Yeah, because if they are borrowing funds from the occupancy tax, that's the lodger's tax, which isn't, that money comes from hotels. So people come, stay in hotels, and they pay an occupancy tax, and that's how that is funded. And so if they're borrowing from that fund, then it needs to bring in people to basically fill up that fund again. There has to be a return on investment.
Right, the event has to put heads in the bed,
Mm-hmm. Heads in beds.
which is said all the time in every meeting we go to.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Okay, so then there's only things that are eligible for lodger's tax. Lodger's tax is basically, it's for advertising, it's publicizing, it's getting the information out to the people to want them to come here. So making sure that when they submit their proposals and their requests to us, we have to know exactly where they're putting their information, who is it going to, and is it really going to bring the tourist? Because you can do the little rat cards, and if you put them at our museum, that's not going to bring the tourists to Roswell because they're already here. But if you do a rat card and you put it in Santa Fe, you know, that could bring them here to see the symphony or one of the events that they would want to see. So placement is a huge deal on some of this stuff. We see it a lot with websites. So it doesn't pay for anybody to design the website. It has to be an advertising banner. So if it's your website, so say I have an event, I have my website up, and I have my banner on it, that's not really advertising because it's my event. Now, if I take my ad and put it on Joe's website, and it brings in a different crowd, then that would qualify. We had one come in not too long ago where there was some questionable pieces on what they were using as their website. It was paying for things that didn't technically qualify because it was technically their website. So you have to ask, you know, where's your website? Where's your banners going? Where's that going to be at? Facebook ads. A lot of people use Facebook ads, and they have to set those parameters to outside of the 30 miles, which Facebook breaks it down, and you can target specific areas and specific people. So they have to be able to tell us, are they actually marketing outside of Roswell? Are they pulling in those people? Radio, in our area, radio, television, and newspaper become a little bit weird because Roswell's more of the hub for some of the areas. So like our radio stations broadcast all the way down to Hobbs and Carlsbad, which would qualify because it's marketing to that area, but it's also marketing to our area at the same time. So they could have local radio stations on it, but it's still marketing outside of the area. The newspaper qualifies the same way, correct?
Mrs. Chair, yes, it is, it qualifies, depends on where that newspaper is coming out of.
So like the Roswell Daily Record?
Needs to, it needs to reach outside of the area, outside of the 30-mile radius.
So it may or may not. I mean, Artesia would be the deciding factor. Does the Roswell Daily Record go to Artesia?
Doesn't the Roswell Daily Record also go out to Ruidoso area and areas between here and Ruidoso?
I don't know. That's where I would think that the events would have to let us know what the reach is of the Roswell Daily Record.
Okay.
Because to me, it's their responsibility to give us that information instead of us trying to figure it out. I think the Roswell Daily Record is kind of a weird one in that sense. But most of them don't do the RDR. They're looking at events in Dallas or Phoenix or some of the larger areas. The T-shirts was a weird one. So if they're giving away a T-shirt for registration, the T-shirts will qualify as an eligible expense. But if they're selling T-shirts, that does not qualify.
Okay.
And then, of course, security, police, fire, emergency, and sanitation also qualify. And it could be city employees, or it could be private contractors providing those services. Both of those qualify.
Okay.
Excuse me, this is Juanita.
Hello.
Can you? Hi there. So the Roswell daily record does not qualify as an eligible expense because it does not reach 30 miles outside of the city, according to the policy. Also on t-shirts, the t-shirts must be for registered participants as a free item. It is not for volunteers, it is not for staff. It is for registered participants, primarily for those that are doing races. Again, that's in our policy under eligible expenses.
And that's the next attachment, the second one.
Thank you, Juanita.
You're welcome.
So the
Alright.
second attachment goes into depth about the, what's eligible and more information. So reading through them and then maybe at our next meeting, giving any feedback on it too, because there's a few pages.
Yeah, so, I mean, I can scan through here and give you some highlights. Lodgers taxes on a first-come, first-served basis. I think that becomes a little weird because it's split into two different times that they can come in and apply. Because right now in the spring when we meet, we're approving events for the second half, for the events after July 1st, so it's July through December?
In April, we do the July through December, and then in August, on the 11th, we do January 1 through June 30th, which will be 21.
Makes sense.
And the reason for that, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Is because the budget for the next fiscal year had not been completed, but usually by April, we do have a preliminary budget by the time it gets to the Finance Committee and the City Council.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you guys have any questions on any of the stuff so far?
On this, if everybody could just take a look at it too and mark it up, and then I can make edits if there's anything we want to change about this in the future for this one. That's the process of the meeting.
I have a question. When you guys talk about the percentage stuff, how does that work?
What do you mean? Oh, go ahead.
Like someone comes up with a request, it's like 50% at this. What does that mean?
So it's the, oh, Kelly, or Carrie, do you want to go ahead? Go ahead. So it's based on the 50% eligibility. So it's like a, Juanita, do you want to expand on that?
Sure. Can you tell me the question again? I'm sorry.
It's about the 50% eligibility. Who determines the 50%?
The policy does.
So
And it's due in part because the organizer, they have to have some skin in the game in order to get funding from the city.
Okay.
So like if you were to want $10,000 or $5,000 from Occupancy Tax Board, you'd have to spend $10,000 in order to get 50% back. And it'd
Okay.
have to
Yes.
be $10,000 of eligible expenses. So $10,000 in advertisements and free t-shirts for registration people, you know, and if you spent $10,000 of that, then you would get $5,000 back.
Okay.
And that's
Correct.
just
If all of them were eligible expenses, correct. That is correct.
Now,
And that,
no.
go ahead. It's up to 50%. So it could be less. It's depending on what's eligible.
Right, so when we get to the reports back and it shows what we awarded them last time they were here and it shows how much they spent out of it, it could be either they didn't do enough advertising or they had a bunch of ineligible expenses. And we have to look at that because that affects, we gave them that amount of money that we couldn't give to anybody else because once we tie it to them, it doesn't come back to us. And so if it's an event organizer who has a history of not utilizing their funds, then we need to really look at that and pay attention, because we could use that money for somebody else
Yeah.
who is using the funds.
Right, it either, you use it or lose it, basically. Yeah.
And I think the whole intent and purpose of your guys' board that we haven't done a great job at, and I'm confident that we will, because most of you guys are new, and I know that Carrie's really tried to help change this, but the goal and intent of this board is to ensure that the money that you are giving out is having a return on the investment, meaning that there are heads and beds to replenish the pot of money. Because what we are seeing when the reimbursements come through, the number of beds that have been booked by these events doesn't even equate to 1% of what we've given out for some of these events.
And just so you guys are, lodger's tax is 5%. So if you paid $100 for a room, you would get 5% back to the lodger's tax fund.
Correct.
So there's a lot of times where you see where I'm doing math when I'm still playing with it. It's because I'm taking, if you want $4,000, but you're saying you're only going to bring in 40 people, how much are you asking for that one bed? Is it $9 per person that you want in lodger's tax, or is it $80 per person in lodger's tax that you're wanting? Because at $80, we're never going to recoup anywhere near close to that on getting it back. So that's why I'm usually doing a lot of math, trying to figure out, again, the best bang for the buck, and is it really bringing people here?
Mm-hmm.
And like Roxanne said, being on the hotel side, really being able to speak that language of how many rooms you brought into the market. When you say you need, say, that, $5,000, how many actual rooms were actual in the market to quantify that money that you're asking. So that's part of the responsibility of the board, is to determine that and to hold accountability and measure it.
I have a question. Can you hear me? I guess you can.
Yes.
So the measure of whether they have met the goal of using our monies and getting it back, does that also take into any account other expenses that these people do as they're in town? Like the food they eat, the stuff they buy? Or is it just based on the room?
Rooms are the only one that collects lodger's tax. The restaurants don't collect a lodger's tax for eating in their restaurant to give back to tourism.
However, it is taken into consideration on their financial summary. We do ask them to complete that to quantify the economic impact that event could have had. But again, it's very subjective, because anybody could fill out any number on that survey that they turn back into us.
Yeah.
So do you ever actually recover in the 5% of the lodger's tax what you give to the people? What we
No.
give to our people?
Wouldn't you consider that some of the events do, like Hike It, Spike It, who roughly averages out to about $1 a person on lodger's tax based off the numbers they provide?
So
I
that was
would-
does happen?
Oh, go ahead.
Or no, that never happens?
There are some. Yeah.
Not everybody's the same. It just depends on which event.
I see.
And I would say for Hike It and Spike It, that one's pretty unique because it's also the same weekend as graduation. And so you can't really tell if it's truly Hike It and Spike It that's giving us that impact, or if it's all the people coming in from out of town for graduation.
Okay.
Any more good questions, Bonnie?
Not yet. It's a lot to learn.
Joe?
Stephanie, did you share with them the lodger's tax handbook that is being developed?
No, we haven't shared that yet.
Okay, so part of the state, can I talk about this, because since it's a workshop?
Yes, you can.
Is Sharon-
Yes.
Okay. So the state tourism department, along with the New Mexico Hospitality Association, have been developing a practical handbook for stakeholders that have to administer lodgers tax within our state. They are planning to roll it out in June. I'm in there. It will have a great table of contents that will kind of walk you through the whole process of lodgers tax. But just some overview of the booklet. Unfortunately, we were not able to share it through the link because it's not shareable at this time. But I can tell you just a couple of little things that were in the book because we actually helped contribute to it. With, they asked us about a survey, and there's a great graph that talks about the path of lodgers tax. And so I'm just going to run through that really quickly because I think it'll help maybe you guys understand a little bit. The collection happens at the lodging business, and from there, those lodging businesses, they submit those reports to the local government, which is the collection of the tax. We as the local government then have to administer and have an administration over the funds. So we ensure that it's being compliant with our code and ordinance and resolutions that are up to date. We make sure that the policies are being followed. So, for example, the lodgers tax policy. We create transparency and consistent standards related to the collection for the lodging facilities, and then also for those event organizers that are spending the money. And then the other one is we have an established and an engaged lodgers tax advisory board, and that's where you guys kind of come in, because then the next step is the disbursement of the funds that are collected, which is the part where you guys evaluate. I think, and I don't know if Bonnie, you got a chance to look at our last meeting, but the budget for fiscal year 21, we had been asked to have a 20% reduction of lodgers tax. So last year, the budget for events within the lodgers tax fund was $61,000. I took 20% off of that number, and I had given it to this board at $50,000 for all of the applications that came through. Then, once they come through this committee, they go on to the finance committee, and at finance committee, they have chosen to table it indefinitely, which basically means that there's no funding. The $50,000 is not going to be funded for fiscal year 21. Normally, if it was funded, then you guys would work through the process, give your recommendation, goes to finance, they either approve or deny, then it goes to council, approve or deny. Then the last part is the oversight and transparency. So they have the event, they turn in invoice, copy of a check, and their proof of performance, because then what we do is we scan all of that and we submit it to the New Mexico DFA, which is the Department of Finance Authority. And then they will come in and they will audit us pretty much once a year to make sure that we are ensuring all of those policies, procedures are being met, to ensure that the use and the funding is being spent for qualified uses and not unqualified uses. And one of the things in the handbook that is coming out is an event economic impact calculator. And I'm really excited about this tool. It is very similar to your guys' scorecard that you use. And so the scorecard, I don't know if it is in your packet. Let me see your packet. Stephanie, do you know if it's in their packet?
It's not in the packet.
Actually, if on the
Points?
purpose, it's on the third page under the approval process.
Yes. So that scorecard is supposed to kind of help you guys develop, but really we look to you guys to determine how you want to score them. If you guys wanted to change that scorecard, we could add it as an action item for next month or the next meeting. I don't know if we'll have a meeting next month. Or we can adopt this economic impact calculator sheet. Basically, it's pretty similar. It asks about the number of tickets sold, the price per ticket, the direct ticket spending, number of attendees from outside the community, average number of days for hotel stays, percentage of attendees staying, in lodging, and it has a formula built into it. And so that's a good tool to use. Also, your scorecard is another great tool to use as well. But I think you guys will like the overview of this booklet as soon as it comes out, and we will adopt it as the state because one of the things we are committed to complying, and also it is best practices, which I think will really help the event organizers, and also will be a guide for all the municipalities across the state to have uniformity and consistency. So. Once it's ready, we will send it to y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. I like the idea of the new process of evaluation. I like that one better than the scorecard. So the scorecard, on the one that says City of Roswell policy, it's page 3, section 6, the approval process, under 4, and then it starts at A. That's where we do the grading system, and it's subjective. I mean, this is where you're supposed to put in how you deem it benefits. So like A, the return on investment, what's the attendance is, you get up to 25 points. You might feel that that event is worth 25 points, where somebody else might feel it's only worth 5 points. So it's extremely subjective, trying to figure out who does and who doesn't, which is why, it's always, we try to make a motion just so we can start having discussions so that we get more people's input and feelings, and really need the input. Yes, I'm looking at you.
Question?
Go ahead.
So these points are what we grade them as when we get their application?
That is
that
correct.
how we handle that before giving money, not afterwards?
You get it before, yes. So whenever we're getting ready to have the big meeting where we go through all of them, they'll give us the packets ahead of time. So they want you to go through it. They want you to read all the information, the data, and go ahead and pre-score it before you even step foot in the room. So that way you can kind of get your sense of what you're feeling. And then, of course, after they talk and answer questions, you might alter some of your numbers because there could be more clarification from the speakers. But you need to kind of have a sense of what it is you feel way before, because trying to get it done in the time frame is hard, because we could have 20 people requesting money.
Right.
Bonnie, I'll share
I
our previous
saw
binder with you too.
I saw applications that were on the city website, looked very detailed and very probably difficult to fill out. They're really detailed,
Yes, but we need that details.
and that's good, but
And you'll discover that some of the events organizers do a great job of providing that information, and some of them don't provide enough information, which makes it difficult to score ahead of time, because then you have to go and you have to ask them, okay, where's the data on this? How many rooms did you actually fill? Because they start giving you numbers from all over, and sometimes there's no consistency in their data from page 1 to page 5, and trying to figure out what they're doing.
And sometimes they don't even have the information because it wasn't on the paper.
Yeah, there's a lot of attached sheets.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's a pet peeve, because, it's there for them just to fill it out. Just put your data in there and then use the total buttons, because I don't want to have to add up all your stuff either. You should be able to add it.
And I will say that's one thing that we will look at when they're filling out the application. One of the things that the state is requiring, based on when we apply for their lodgers tax funding from the state side, is that whatever they fill out, so for example, if they say they're going to do a billboard in Lubbock, Texas, and that's the money that you guys have approved, we should be getting back an invoice, the proof of performance, and the check that was issued, paid for, and written by the bank for a billboard in Lubbock, Texas. They should not be changing what you all have have recommended and council has approved. Excuse me, let me rephrase that. The council has approved, because that's something that they have been doing, which again, it confuses them. And if they just would put exactly what they're asking for on the list, it will be a guide for them to pre-plan their marketing strategy. And that's why it should be as detailed as possible. I mean, I look at it from the city's point of view. If I just told the council, oh, I need $100,000, but I'm not telling them what it's for, they would probably deny my request for that. Or if they did approve $100,000 and then I went and spent it on, XYZ that was not listed, I would be questioned for those dollars that are being spent. So they really do need to fill that out as detailed as possible. And I know that Stephanie will do a good job at making sure that what they've listed on here is actually what they have purchased with the amount awarded by the council.
And one thing we're also looking at with the reimbursement is this an effort? Did they spend the money to get out-of-towners to Roswell, like a Lubbock billboard or something that is quantifiable, that is out-of-town effort? So it gets a little vague with some of them, and I think that has been the challenge a little bit too.
I have to agree, because in the form that they have to fill out, it tells them that they specifically have to state and show copies of their advertisements. So if they're putting a billboard in Lubbock, we should see what the billboard in Lubbock looks like in the application process. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And yet I can maybe name twice in the 20,000 years I've been on this board, it feels like, that I've seen an actual layout of any of the artwork or anything for it. So yeah, I think the organizers have got to get better at providing the correct information and filling it out. Even though they might feel it's redundant, it helps them because we need the input from them to help them. Mm-hmm. And so I guess if they don't provide information, that's where it's not eligible.
I would say that, yeah.
So one of the things I have to say is in the past, we've been a little bit lenient on some things, just kind of feels like we've just done check mark, check mark. One, we've never had a workshop before since I've been on here. So I think this is kind of nice to kind of work out some of these policies and procedures and kind of get everybody feeling the same way. But you almost kind of feel like, we kind of felt at the last meeting where we had to say, recommend no money, and it wasn't necessarily because of the event. It was just the times with us not having any lodgers tax money coming in because we're in this financial situation we're in. And then, is it really going to be a bang for our buck? And so this was the first time some of the organizers have ever been told no. And I don't think it went over very well, but at the same time, we're not here to make friends with everybody. We're here to make sure that the tax dollars are supposed to go where they need to go so that we can get people here. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we have to remember, every event organizer, I love their events. I can say that there's not a single event that happens in Roswell that I don't agree with. I think they're great. I think they're fantastic. There's some that come that are not tourist events that think that they are, and we give them money, and it's like, why? You're really not bringing tourists here. So I think we have to be better stewards at looking at those events, and it's nothing personal to the event. It's not personal towards the event organizer. We just have to look at those tax dollars, and it literally is specifically for bringing people here. And I reiterate, there's great events, but they're not all tourist events.
Thanks, Carrie. We also discussed having maybe possible another workshop on the other side, helping them with the reimbursements, having everybody understand how to get on board with the Lubbock billboard or the getting the people out of town. So we've kind of, that's an idea too.
I think that's great too, because I think they need just as much, because the majority of the people who are applying for this are not marketing majors, so they don't really understand how the marketing piece works, and so.
And a lot are volunteers.
Right, and then the volunteers change every year, so this way, at least if somebody has understanding, so that way going forward, it helps. I think we just need to help each other make this better process.
Thank you.
And we are open to all your ideas that you have. You guys are our advisory board.
Then can we add on the application if the room nights they brought in are actual room nights and not including the ones that are done on trade? Because hotel room nights done on trade bring in no lodger's tax. Because if you had an event and you say that you brought in 100 room nights for hotels, but that hotel actually gave you 20 room nights in trade for tickets to their event for your, employees, then really you only brought in 80 hotel room nights. And I would like that specific, I would like that separation so that I can, because I know a lot of these events have come to me and asked for trade, so.
Roxanne, we could ask for a hotel report, and that could eliminate comps and trades if you wanted to. It could be whatever you want, but actualized rooms, there's a way you can do a report with actualized rooms and not the trades and the comps. That could be open for discussion.
Yeah, I would like
wanted.
that added on the application. Some worded somehow probably nicer than how I worded it, but.
I kind of agree, because they're going to you, but however many other hotels did they go to? So if you gave them 20 and then they went to the hotel across the street and they gave them 20, so they really could have comped out the entire 100 rooms.
Exactly.
And no lodger tax
and zero
comes in.
lodger's tax, exactly. So,
And that would just upset me and break my heart.
yeah, because then they're saying that they're bringing in lodger's tax, but really they're not.
It goes back to eligibility. We could look at that.
Do they still have to fill out, is there still a specific questionnaire for the public to fill out at the events?
Yes, there is. They do a survey.
They have,
So do they provide you guys the copy of that survey?
I get a copy of the surveys.
Are they filling those surveys out? In the past, we used to see the surveys or parts of the surveys, I think.
That could be something that you guys require if you had specific questions, or if we had to supply a specific link to the event organizers for them to give out to participants. That's really up to you guys.
Well, I think there's a disconnect, because if you're a ticketed event, then you have access to everybody that's coming in. So you should have a completed, full, detailed survey. There's some that, are just guessing. How much money did you spend in gross receipts tax? How much food did you buy? Did you buy gas? That's kind of arbitrary, because we don't really, there's no specific numbers with it. But knowing how many of those came from out of town specifically to that event. I think we have some ticketed events that I think do a great job, and I think we have others that do a horrible job at providing that correct information. And I think it's just because they may want to look better. I don't know. There just has to be some better reporting, especially with ticketed events.
especially having a better consistency between all the events gives us a better idea of how to compare, and how much lodger's tax they bring in, so.
I agree. And then some of the events aren't even actually bringing, tourists, the way I would consider a tourist, but they're bringing participants. Some of the races. People only come here for the races, so
I think that's still considered tourism, even if it is just for a specific, like, race.
But the number one goal is the overnight heads and beds.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So like where they bring in all their musicians and those are the only ones that are staying.
That's true.
It
And
kinda-
sometimes
it kinda
those are
gets weird
on-
and a little
on
funky.
trade.
Because if you don't give them lodger's tax, are they still going to bring the musicians in to have the event? It's like, I don't know, in a way, I kind of feel like we're giving them money to be able to host that event. And if they didn't have it, they might not be able to because it's really paying for the key component of their
Right.
event. And it's not really marketing. You know what I mean?
That's true. That'd be like bringing in, I don't know, Brad Paisley or something and claiming that his room nights and for him and his band are what the event brought in. Well, technically the event brought it in, but it's like, it's a circle. Like the event brought it in, but that event is for them, but it's the event that brought it in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that I think becomes confusing and a little bit weird.
Well, I haven't been on the board a whole long. Have some of these people been doing this for years? I remember last time we talked about maybe if they've done it for so long. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
The ones that keep coming back and keep coming
Talking
back.
about the
and-
seed money?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that there needs to be something where there's some sort of policy or clause that says after a certain amount of time, you kind of need to do the event on your own.
So in the 4 years that I've been on here, I've only seen 2 new events come in. Everybody else that has asked for money are existing events.
And I mean, it's one thing to have like an event year after year and ask for the lodger's tax to help with that event, but it's another to see that event year after year bring you their financials and it's in the red every year. It's like you're not bringing anything in, you're obviously just spending more money than you have. And that's hard to determine whether or not they should, get funding.
So if there was only 2 new ones that came in, do you think that's just because there wasn't funding for that, or is just not much interest?
Maybe a bit of both. Maybe also they didn't know about coming to the occupancy tax board to request funding as well.
Well, and that's a possibility because not every event that happens in town comes here because, again, they might know that they're a local event, that they technically wouldn't bring the tourist in that they need to bring in.
Or maybe they don't even need the assistance. Maybe they just do it on their own and they're good to go.
Right, so like we have a lot of walks in town, and they'll bring in people because they're part of a bigger organization. I'll use the autism group, for example. They hold a walk. They bring a lot of people in from Albuquerque because that's the head of their autism organization, but they don't come here and ask for lodger's tax, and I think that's probably because they don't really feel that they would qualify because they're not marketing to bring them in. They're more of a close-knit, and it's because they're already partners of it. So I think that might be some why we don't see new people. I don't think necessarily it's because we don't have money. I think it'd be more because people, 1, don't know about it, or 2, really don't do that kind of participation or marketing for it.
It's definitely something to think about for the future, though, as we move forward and events are.
Yeah, because for the future, I think we'd have less money. So, in my opinion, it should go towards the people that haven't been kind of living off of the tax board for 10 years.
Give
Right.
those new ones more opportunity than the ones that continuously come in. Yeah, because I mean, isn't that the whole point of this? Is that new events to bring people to Roswell,
Yes.
instead of giving it to the same people every year who we know are going to bring in people, but who aren't using it wisely, per se.
Right, so yeah, I completely agree. I mean, there should probably be some kind of limits on it. I mean, if we look at it in a sense of some of the events, in order to have that event, all your people coming to see you, you've already got their phone numbers, their emails, you have their contact information. you can get a hold of them. So if you received no funding for lodger's tax, you still could access them because you have that information. But then we have other events who really have no database, so then they truly are relying on outside marketing. And so trying to figure out, the best uses of some of that money and getting things where it needs to go. And that was so way off of where I was going, but I don't remember where I started.
It's all good.
It's the extra CO2.
May I go back?
Yes.
Okay, just so I understand. You were talking about trading the rooms for comp? It seems strange to me that the city doesn't collect lodger's tax anyway on those rooms.
If it's done out of trade, then it's
If somebody's in a room,
marked as a
it's
comped
not-
room.
they're not paying money for it,
Mm-hmm.
but the motel is getting something, which is free tickets or whatever, which is
Whatever
money.
is being traded, yeah.
So doesn't the city ask these motels to pay lodger's tax on things that they don't get paid for?
No, it's based off of actualized revenue. Yeah.
That should change.
Well, but it's really not the hotels who are the ones who are providing the money. It's whoever the occupant of the room is. I mean, it's just
Well,
like if I
they
traded out
get- If they
food.
get tickets in exchange for staying there, the tickets are money.
So sometimes it's traded for intangible things like advertising, really. It's not a physical ticket to go somewhere. It's done for, I can't even think of other things besides
Still,
advertising.
if they're comping rooms, the motel should be responsible for paying lodger's tax on that room.
But if it's a
We should
percentage,
talk to the
if
city
it's
about that.
a percentage based on revenue, if the room rate.
If it's at zero, yeah, right.
If
If
it's
it's at
at
zero,
zero,
they're not
then
paying
you-
anything.
Yeah.
The
Then
person is not paying
realistically,
anything.
that room is costing the hotel money because someone still has to go in and clean it and restock everything. So,
Right, so if the event gives $0 for that room, even though there is a ticket or whatever the trade is, they're giving $0, and it actually has to be physical cash. Then they
The
take the
city,
5%.
the city is not getting money for those rooms.
No, and it's
No.
the same thing
And
when
they
we trade
should.
out in food.
They should. I mean, that's not our business, but they should.
But that's a state decision. I mean, when we file, and I can do it based off of GRT, because when I do food trade outs for events, it becomes tax exempt. It doesn't show because there's no cash being traded out.
That is
Roxanne,
contrary
one
to-
idea,
That's
you,
contrary to all accounting principles and taxing basis.
well, hotels give out free rooms, which is contrary to restaurants giving out a free meal too.
Yeah.
But a ratio of 1 comp per 20 consumed, would that be an option?
yeah, some hotels will do that. Yeah, they'll do like, all right, you have to provide this number of rooms and we'll give you a free one. A lot of, I know sports teams like to do that. They'll be like, all right, well, we'll take 15 rooms and if you provide us a free room for the coach, that sort of thing.
Right. It's a practice with comp rooms that's been around for a really long time. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, they don't pay all sales tax, room tax, they don't pay any tax. It's a comp
Yeah.
across the board.
Yeah. They'd be like,
I understand that's the way it is. All I'm saying is that if you can compare it to personal income, all of us, if we provide a service, like I was a CPA, if I provide a free tax return and they're going to give me candy, I am supposed to report that candy as income because it is income. It's not a credit card and it's not green, but it's income.
and you would determine that based on how much you would have charged for the service?
Yeah.
So like if you were to charge $100 for
So they're
a
going to
tax
give me
return, but they
$100
gave-
worth of candy.
Okay.
I am obliged to report that as income for me.
That's not some thing
That's the
I've
way the
ever
whole
heard
tax
of
system
doing.
works.
Yeah. I haven't been
Services
in the
and
industry
goods
that long, but yeah.
are income.
Mhm.
Well, I know we can't do anything about that, but maybe I can.
I don't know, I look at it when we trade out with the homeless. I'm giving them food, and it might be that they put my name on a banner, on a float, on a parade. There's no income. I'm not getting anything from them. I'm actually giving them things. There's nothing for me to
Trade,
report.
every trade is a trade. Whether it's measurable, whether it's not measurable, a trade is a trade.
Right, but we don't report it as income because it's an expense. It becomes an advertising expense,
Okay.
which would be the same thing as what the hotels are doing when they comp out. When they give away 20 rooms, well, you have to put my name in your program, so then it becomes an advertising expense.
True, because it does bring down the like the average rate on the room. So if you had 100 rooms and 5 of them or 10 of them were comped, you're still going to divide it by 100 because that's how many rooms there was. It brings down the revenue per all the rooms. So it does still include it as an expense because it brings down the average.
Okay.
That's an interesting
Second question.
comment.
Second question. I think you said our budget for this coming year is 50,000? Is that what I heard?
It was. It's
Did Juanita say it was
been
on
tabled
hold?
the whole indefinitely.
So in other words, we have no budget. They're not going to approve anything.
Well, in April, it stopped at the Finance Committee. So for fiscal year from July 1 till December 31st, we do that in April. That has been tabled indefinitely, and that's where it sits.
And table means it's dead. So,
Table means they're not giving out the money. It's indefinite until it's not indefinite, basically.
right.
So if, at the next finance committee, if they decide that there's enough money and they want to bring it back onto the table, they can go in and do whatever they want and re-award the money.
Okay.
So it's like, let's put a pin
But
on it. and we'll
unless
think
they
about it
do,
later.
even if we get applications for that time period, we really,
The next time I get applications is in August. I collect the applications and we come together August 11th to review them again.
okay. Then by then, we might have money.
And that'll be for 21. So that's going to be January 1, 2021 till June 30th, 21.
Okay.
We already did those applications in April,
Yeah.
this past April.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear
We
you.
already did those applications this past April.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have no idea where the money will or will not be
I
until.
mean, we just recommend they could say no to everything anyway. if they
And
want
after
it.
finance, it goes to city council. So it takes that process.
Yeah, okay.
And honestly, they've done both ways. So we've recommended things and they've given them extra money. And then this past finance committee, we recommended and they gave them no money. So it's still fluid. And I don't recall any council meeting specifically where they've modified, because usually those are on the consent agenda. But somebody can pull it off of the consent agenda and they can renegotiate amounts again. Because technically, the council meeting is the final say-so of the money. It doesn't matter what anybody does prior to that. All right, you guys got any more process review discussion?
Just the reports, that's all.
Because if not, then we'll go to the reports. All right. I'm not discussing reports, you are.
So we have 2 reports here in front of us. We've got the lodger's tax report, which is up until March. It's always trailing a month behind. And it's a 3-year comparison, as you can see, where we sit fiscal year 2020 year-to-date. And the room nights are on the top.
Question, past due estimated?
Correct. So if a hotel has been extended, that's the past due that will be added.
Where are you seeing that?
It's in the second box, lodger's tax collected by month, that very
Oh,
bottom.
past due, gotcha, okay.
And that goes through City Hall leadership, so that's why.
Because I know in the past, there was one hotel who was past due, but this is the first time I've ever seen a past due amount.
Yeah, I think he made some exception, the COVID, so we're keeping an eye on that.
Okay.
And the other one, the second report, were there any questions on the lodger's tax report? No. The second report is the convention center report, and just to explain, convention center is the $2.50 bed fee tax, which goes towards the convention center. That's also collected, and that's your totals and your room nights at the top.
Okay, so we're always given the convention center fee reports, but technically, it really does nothing for us, right? You just put it there so that we see it?
The other report we normally look at is the ledger balance, which will now be revised and go to the next fiscal year.
Any questions on the reports?
Why not? Why not? I have a question. I don't know if anybody has the answer to it. Do we have any idea how much of a loan we still owe on this building? Does anybody know? It says here that we're paying, principal was $410,000 that was paid last time, plus $70,000 interest. Do we have any idea, does anybody have any idea how much we still owe on this building?
I can look at the report that shows that information and follow up with you.
Oh, that would be great. I'd really appreciate it. Not that it has anything to do with what we reward, but it's interesting to me.
Right, yeah, we don't see that on our side.
Right?
Technically, we have nothing to do with the convention
Nothing.
center.
But if you're going to give me a report, I'm going to ask a question.
All right, so unless anybody has any other questions or anything about any of the stuff that was presented?
Did Bonnie have a question about the loan payment? Sorry.
Yes, Juanita, she did.
Rough estimate, I know our loan payment is $480 that is due in August, and then the principal, I think, is $68,000 that's due in February, and we pay it off in 2032, and that's like $500,000. So I'll have to get it, I don't know off the top of my head, but I can get it for you here in just a minute.
Thank you.
One
Thank
sec.
you. Thank you. Long time. Wow.
Are we still waiting on Juanita to come back? No? All right, and then if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
I have it. You ready for it?
Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, you can adjourn.
I called, this meeting is adjourned at 3:33 PM.
Next meeting is June 16th.
Okay, Juanita.